Hello, and welcome back to the final installment of our School Finance Engagement Group. I'm your co-host, Dr. Rich Macheski, Superintendent of Schools. With me, Dan Trudell, Assistant Superintendent for Business Services. We're pleased today to wrap up our conversation around school finance in Troy and across the state of Michigan, and how specifically the Troy School District is impacted by funding out of Lansing and some of the challenges associated with the work that we've been doing. Today we want to talk about several key topics. Specifically, we want to talk about bond. We want to talk about budget projections for the 26-27 school year. We want to talk about an important millage that will be in front of voters in Troy in August of 2026, August 4th of 2026, and a little bit more around advocacy. What can you do to get involved to help support school funding and the Troy School District? So let's start with bond specifically. And we have to start first by thanking the voters in the Troy School District. The voters back in 2022 were supportive of a $555 million bond initiative, which has already begun revolutionizing instructional space and athletic space across the Troy School District. So we couldn't be more thankful of the voters in Troy and the support that they provided us. Our projects are really starting to come to life. Some have been completed, and some, like the upcoming opening of the new Smith Middle School, is on its final stages of completion. We intend to open Smith Middle School this coming fall of 26. Over 650-ish or so students will walk through those doors in August of next fall and are going to walk into a facility that is, again, will revolutionize their instructional experience, their learning experience. We couldn't be more excited about that project, and we look forward to welcoming the community as we do a full-scale community open house later in the fall. So be looking for that, because that's something that you will definitely want to see. We're pleased to say that the Smith Middle School project is both on schedule, as we will be opening in the fall. And also, and more importantly, it is on budget. And anyone that's doing any large-scale renovations now knows how challenging that is. So we couldn't be, again, more proud of the work that's been done. We're thankful to not only our voters, but we're thankful to our partners, TMP, who is an architecture firm, Barton Mallow, our construction manager, and all of the other individuals that have jumped in to make this project a reality. And it was extremely important for us to get that Smith project done, because that starts a couple of other dominoes that will occur yet this fall. As soon as school gets out in June, we'll be packing up all of Bowen Park Middle School. We'll be leaving that building as quickly as possible. As soon as the students leave and staff are out the doors, we'll be following with them with all of their belongings. We'll be coming with them, and we'll start a complete reno of the Bowen Park Middle School, a 16-month project that will involve getting started immediately in June, and then we will welcome students, the Bowen Park students, back in fall of 2027. They'll be back in that building fall of 2027. In the meanwhile, they will spend next school year at the old Smith Middle School. So when I say the dominoes needed to fall, we needed to get that Smith Middle School project done so that we could get those students into New Smith Middle School and then get the Bowen Park students into Old Smith while we're doing that reno. We will do the very same project at Larson in the summer of 2027. As the Larson students leave for the school year, we'll be doing a similar reno that we're doing at Bowen Park, given those are sister schools. We'll be doing that same reno over the course of the 16 months, and then we will welcome Larson students back to the newly renovated Larson fall of 2028. So a lot of work going on in our middle schools across the school district. If you have had need to come to central office over the course of the last couple of months, you'll notice that we had relocated to the services building, and we're thankful to the folks over at Services for welcoming us there as we did a minor renovation of the administrative building. We have since just moved back into the administrative building, so 4400 Livernois is back open. So if you have reason to come to central office, our doors are open, and we look forward to the public coming into our building and seeing this newly renovated space. Additional work is happening across our elementaries, although maybe not as significant as our middle school projects, but equally important at our elementary schools. When you walk in to WAS, for instance, Barnard, Bemis, Hamilton, you'll see that over the main doors when you come in, there are new soffits. Those soffits were old, they were starting to rust out, they just did not look inviting, and we've got new soffits up in those buildings, and they look great. We're also doing some much-needed restroom renovations. One of the key pieces of feedback that we received from the community, from students, from staff, and from the community at our elementary were that all of our restrooms were looking old and tired. And so we are tackling those restroom renovations in 3 phases. Phase 1, which will already begin this summer, are Costello, Martell, Schroeder, and Troy Union. All of the restrooms in those buildings will be renovated, so we'll have new tile, new fixtures, and so forth. Really bringing those restrooms up to a standard that is appropriate here in the Troy School District. And you can see in phases 2 and 3, we will tackle those other projects in our elementary buildings. So we look forward to being able to bring those online to our elementary students. If you have had reason to be in any of our outdoor facilities, you'll know that we have completed renovation of all 12 of our middle school, or of our of our playgrounds, and we're doing some finishing touches in terms of some site work and so forth. You may have noticed in some of our playgrounds there was fencing around some areas that we were growing in, grass and so forth. So we're working to remove that fencing where possible, so that we can completely restore those sites. We're also working with students, because we did get some feedback from students that, albeit the playgrounds are really nice, they wanted a little extra of this or a little extra of that. They noticed that they could use a little more equipment in one area more so than another. So we engaged those students in conversation, and we're working to add some additional opportunities for those students, whether it be something fixed, or whether it just be some additional access to balls and things along those lines that they can play with. We're doing continued furniture work across the school district, so we're doing Troy High in multiple phases. So phase 2 will begin at Troy High this summer, as well as our Troy Center for Transition, which is located in the International Academy next to Baker Middle School. And then, of course, some of the biggest transformations, if you've had a chance to be at both high schools, are the athletic fields. This summer, we will be 100% complete at Troy High when we complete the track. We're looking forward to completing the track there at Troy High. We'll bring that project to a close. And we're continuing work at Athens. That project is a little bit further behind Troy High. We started that after Troy High. But again, if you've had a chance to see those facilities, they really are, they're tremendous. They're world-class facilities, which again, our athletes deserve, our community certainly deserves, and we're happy to be able to deliver on. So a significant amount of work happening across the Troy School District from a bond perspective. And again, I'll have to go back to thank you to the voters for entrusting us with that $555 million. We are nearing the end of Series 1, the $190 million that was initially generated for those projects. We have recently sold Series 2, so as we're finishing up spending Series 1, we'll then shift into spending Series 2, a little over $200 million in Series 2, which also included some refinancing of bonds, which is really important. So as old debt is falling off, we're able to refinance that debt and return return that to the voters to the tune of about $5 million. And so that's really important. I'm going to turn this section over to Dan and let him talk a little bit more about the most recent bond sale.
Yep, thanks, Dr. Macheski. So as Dr. Macheski mentioned, we do have just under $220 million of new bond funds that were raised as part of our Series 2 sale. So if you look on this slide here, we had just over $193 million towards the actual Series 2 towards construction, but then we also had just under $23 million included in the total sale, and that was primarily to refund, or in more simple terms, refinancing a 2016 bond that we had coming due and mature here in the month of May. So it was a successful sale for the district. You know, we went at the beginning of March. We partnered with Huntington Bank on the sale for this, who was incredibly supportive in their efforts in making sure that we did secure some of the best rates on the market in that day. So you can see we have maturity dates ranging from as soon as next year all the way out to almost 30 years from now. So those rates range from 2.21% up to 4.59%. So those came in just under some of our targeted estimates as we went into the sale on that morning. So very successful bond sale, all things considered. And then on the refunding side, we had some bonds that were maturing. They were hitting their 10-year mark here in May of 2026. And so through that, we had to make the decision as a district, do we want to have those rates naturally go up per the schedules that they were following? It was kind of an out clause that the investors wanted to give us as a district, that after 10 years, if we wanted to refinance those at a lower rate, then we certainly could do that. So as you can see from this slide here, we went from upcoming 4.5% rate after May of this year, and we were able to refinance down to just over 2.3% there. So from an interest perspective, that does save us a little over $1.5 million over the life of those bonds. So again, we continuously monitor our bond amortization schedules. We're checking to make sure that if there's any opportunity at all that we can go through and refinance some of those debts at a lower rate, then we're certainly going to do so. Because at the end of the day, the voters in our city, in our district, they ultimately did approve the 2022 bond, and that's where these dollars are ultimately being pulled from. So jumping over to some budgetary projections. So as we look at the upcoming school year, we generally are on the lookout from the governor on the House and the Senate at the state legislature, and they're releasing their proposals for what they believe school funding should be for the upcoming school year. So both the governor, House and Senate, all three of them have actually released similar budgets from a foundation perspective, all of which have a $250 per pupil increase budgeted for the upcoming school year. So from an enrollment standpoint, we're just over 12,000 students for the current school year. So 12,069 was our most recent figure. As we continue to look at projections over the next few years, we partner with an outside firm, Plant Moran Real Point, and they are the ones that are going through all the demographic data and working with the local municipalities and federal data, state data, and they're going through and they're reaffirming and confirming what we believe our enrollment projections are as well. So it's good to have a third-party partner in those efforts. And so as we look, we're losing between 250 and 300 students per year right now, which is largely driven by a larger school of choice population that has been continuously graduating through our system. And so when we're graduating a class of 1,000 kids, but we're also bringing in around 700 to 750 new kindergartners each year. That's a natural reduction that we're planning for. So as we continue to budget out over the next few years, we're taking into consideration those enrollment declines, which were a strategic decision made by our board many years ago. So
I think it's also important to note, Dan, you did a great job with that. Important to note that this is we have been forecasting the loss of enrollment over the course of the last several years, because as we monitor, again with Plant Moran Real Point, as we monitor live births in Oakland County, across Michigan, and more specifically in Oakland County, we have seen over the course of the last several decades actually, the birth rate continuing to decline. And as that birth rate is declining, albeit we're still capturing the same percentage of students, the overall number has gone down, and as a result of that, we're seeing fewer kindergartners on an annual basis. Again, same thing that is happening across school districts across the state of Michigan, and really this is a national issue.
Right.
There are just fewer children being born, and so forth. So as you say, we'll graduate 1,000 seniors this year, and we'll bring in 700 to 750, hopefully closer to 750 kindergartners. So you can see over time, as we're graduating more of our seniors, we're bringing in less kindergartners. There is going to be that natural kind of decline in enrollment, and that's what we're seeing. But more importantly, to your point, we're planning for that moving forward.
So the net effect of those enrollment changes, we have a very, very small school of choice program right now. This was our first year currently that we're in, and for the upcoming school year, our board did approve 100 slots for school of choice, primarily at kindergarten and first grade. And really just as a small little lever to pull in order to fill in some of our lower enrolled elementary schools. That offsets some of that 250 to 300 student loss each year. So the net effect of that is just under 12,000 students for the upcoming year. So we're budgeting around 11,869 students for the upcoming year. So from a revenue standpoint, what does that mean? We have a $250 per pupil increase times our projected enrollment. That's going to give us just under $3 million of new foundation allowance towards our expenditures. And then I have to deduct some of the money that I am anticipating losing from those enrollment declines. So our current foundation in the current school year multiplied by our projected decrease of enrollment means we're losing just over $2 million of foundation allowance. So the net effect is just under $1 million of new foundation money going into the upcoming school year.
And for the sake of context, $800,000 is just under $1 million, is about 0.5% of our budget. So we anticipate revenues of about 0.5% next year. And as we talk about expenditures, and just in a couple of slides, you can see how the real challenge that we face here in the Troy School District, and again, is faced across school districts as enrollment continues to decline and revenues aren't keeping pace with inflation, and costs continue to go up. This is where we talk about budget reduction, the need for budget reductions, and so forth. But we'll get into that in just a few moments here. We have a slide here just to kind of share with you exactly what we shared just a few moments ago. This demonstrates where we have been from an enrollment standpoint from the 2018-19 school year. 18-19 was our all-time high in the Troy School District, and Dan had mentioned that we've been drawing down schools of choice. In other words, schools of choice families that have been in the district for a while are graduating out, and as the district at that time decided not to draw back on schools of choice, we've got schools of choice families that are graduating out. We have less enrollment, so you can see the impact of that over time. That's the green line, and 11,869 is what we anticipate next year, and that red line demonstrates where if we continue along the same trend, that's where we would end up in around the 29-30 school year. Of course, our goal is to stem that tide. Our goal is to come in higher and shift that line up. That's our goal, but we have to deal with the realities that we're working with now from a budgeting standpoint. Likewise, the key factor for us from a per pupil basis is a foundation allowance, and we're budgeting for and anticipating a $250 increase in foundation for next year. So you can see where we are right now, $10,836. That's the blue bar on the far right, and you can see where we have been as a school district over the course of the last 20 years. Essentially flat. So in real dollars, we actually are dealing with less money, less revenue in real dollars than we were 20 years ago. And we say that because if you look at the yellow line that goes across the graph, that is where if increases in foundation were keeping pace with inflation, that's where we should be. So we should be about $4,500 more on a per pupil basis now if increases from the state, we're keeping pace with inflation, which is about $50 to $55 million in our budget. And so that is that revenue that we're not seeing, that gap between the blue bar and the yellow line. That's the real challenge for us. That cost of doing business, that gap continues to get wider and wider, and that's where we have to talk about the need for budget reductions, and so that's where we are now.
So looking at an expenditure component of our budget, we like to share this type of information with our staffs in our community. Just in looking at what makes up our total budget. So as we look at our grand total budget, our expenditures are just under $200 million. So you can see from this graphic here, under the annual total column there, the grand total of salaries and benefits across our district is just over $145 million. So we wanted to kind of give a representation of where do those dollars actually come from. So we have various different groups across our entire district. We have our teacher group, which is by and far our largest group. Obviously, we have hundreds and hundreds of classrooms to fill with qualified teachers. So we have 870 teachers. We have 47 administrators across the district. We have 75 secretarial staff. We have 107 paraprofessional and skilled trade staff across the district. And then we also have 138 non-represented employees. And primarily in the non-represented group, you have a lot of central office support staff, various other support positions across the district. We have our adult special ed staff that are included in there, our alternative high school over at TCCHS, and we have some of our adult ed as well. So a myriad of employees in that category. But that said, it's about $94 million of total salaries that makes up our entire budget for the current year. And then with that comes retirement costs. We have FICA costs, which is Social Security and Medicare, and then we have healthcare costs as well. We often talk about, what is a retirement rate in a corporate world where you may pay anywhere from 3 to 6% as an employer towards an employee's health care. In our case, we're paying upwards of 30% towards retirement for every dollar we pay an employee. And about half of that amount, that 30%, about half of it is actually funding current retirees. So not only are we paying towards an active current employee in terms of their retirement, but we're also paying for every dollar on those active employees we're paying to fund current retirees, just to make sure that those pension payments are continuously going out. That's what the state of Michigan requires on our behalf. So you can see a pretty sizable amount of expenditures beyond just salary. So we like to highlight this because we're 85-90% staffing in our district, and that's what we're in the business of educating kids, and so we need people to do that. From that end, we want to look at projected increases then going into the next year. So you can see under the 26-27 school year column, the amount highlighted in red there is just under $7 million of new projected costs going into the upcoming school year. Mm-hmm. And that's largely driven by those contractual agreements that we have with all of those employee groups. So for us, when we're committing ourselves to nearly $7 million of new costs, because we want to make sure that we're attracting and retaining the best and most qualified staff members across all of our employee groups, we also know that inflation is a real thing for them too. And so we have a commitment to make sure that we're increasing their pay as they continue to try to pay their own personal expenditures. So bringing in just under $1 million of new revenue, but also committing to almost $7 million of new costs, it's just a structural imbalance, unfortunately, that we are battling right now.
Yeah. I will add that the community may be aware that our team here in Troy has been working diligently. John Pagel, Brian Canfield, our employee services team, have been working with all of our bargaining units to extend our contractual agreements in order for us to have our known obligations for us to understand and be able to plan for our known obligations into the future. And so we're very pleased to be able to say that we've extended the TEA contract, the TESA and TESPA contract for 3 years, which puts us in a position to have 4 years of settled contracts in all of those groups. And these were appropriately bargained contracts, but what it allows for us now is to strategically budget forward, knowing what our costs are going to be. So, albeit we know our costs, and Dan's gone over what those look like over the course of the next several years, unfortunately, what we don't know are the revenues that we're going to receive from the state. That's the unknown on an annual basis. And in some cases, we don't even know that when we're putting our budget together. We're pretty confident this year in the $250, since all three of the fiscal agents put out a budget, seem to be pretty consistent around that 250 mark. I will remind the public that last year we didn't get a budget until after school had started. In fact, about 6 weeks after school had started. It wasn't until early October that we actually saw a budget last year. So we do our best to deal with assumptions, but we have to continue as a community to push back on our legislators to do their job and deliver a budget for schools, recognizing that we have to deliver our budget to the board in June that has to be approved for a start in August, while the state doesn't necessarily have to, they don't have to approve their budget until the end of September. And so there is this annual push and pull with the legislature. It's important for the community to recognize that oftentimes we have to deal with assumptions because we just simply don't know. And you don't always get it right when you're dealing with assumptions. It also, the state can put us in a real difficult position as we think about decisions we have to make around budget reductions. And that's what we're going to go over now, where we are with reductions for the 26-27 school year.
So yeah, as we look at where we're at for the current year, so we're in the 2025-26 school year, we have a projected ending deficit for the year, an operating deficit of $5.6 million. And so that is largely driven by the end of the federal funds that districts all across the country had received. So there was nearly $8 trillion worth of federal pandemic funds that were issued by the federal government, and then those trickled down each to the state of Michigan and all the states across the United States, but then also directly even to school districts. So we, as the Troy School District, had upwards of $32 million over a 4-year period that we could invest in additional supports that were needed during the pandemic. So it was well beyond PPE, all the masks and the sanitizers and all of that. There was a lot of support positions that were highly necessary across that 4-year span. So for us, last fiscal year was the first year that districts, especially our district, that those funds were gone. But those positions were not eliminated at that time. The need was still there to have all of the additional social work and counseling supports and math specialists to really make sure kids had the appropriate support system to continue to succeed. So as we went into this fiscal year, we said, okay, we are going to attempt to downsize through attrition on those positions, but the money, unfortunately, is not there anymore for that. So it starts to build up a little bit over time, and that's where this $5.6 million deficit stems from. Structurally, if we don't change revenues and expenditures, that is going to continue into the upcoming school year. So we'll kind of use that as our baseline operational or structural deficit for the upcoming school year. And then to that, I need to add in all of my known committed costs through all of our bargaining agreements with our employee groups. So that's an additional $6.8 million that I would need additional funding for to cover those expenditures. We also have non-staffing cost increases. So electricity goes up every year. The cost of gas goes up. Water goes up every year. We have contractual agreements with our transportation and custodial contractors that there's slight increases to those agreements as well. So we like to plug in just a general $500,000 increase to that. So again, that'll add to the deficit unless I get enough money to cover those costs. So the state does have a $250 per pupil projected increase going into next year. That's where that $2.9 billion of funding comes from. That would then offset some of that structural deficit. But then I also know that I'm losing student enrollment a little bit each year, so I have to factor that in. So the net effect of all of those factors would be just over $12 million towards a deficit if I did not take any action today.
Right.
So that leads us into the difficult conversations that districts all across the country are having at this point in time, trying to get our cost structures back in alignment going into the upcoming school year.
Right. And so we started with the board in January. We started this conversation earlier this year, recognizing that we were going to have a deficit, a very significant deficit that we were going to have to have a plan, a strategy to reduce going into the 26-27 school year. So starting that conversation with the board in January, we shared with them how we were going to approach this budget reductions. We were going to focus on three things. First, we were going to focus on reductions as far away from the classroom as possible. Our core mission is ensuring learning for all. That occurs in our classrooms, and so we have to do everything we can to protect the core of the organization, which is teaching and learning, what happens in our classroom. So reductions should stay as far away from the classroom as possible. Secondly, we also need to continue to support our students who need extra supports in some manner or another. So we want to continue to provide supports for students, and so reduction should come as far away from those areas as possible. Now I say as possible because in a budget that is 93-94% personnel, it's people. We're a people organization. It's very difficult to not impact FTE or full-time equivalent or people within the organization. So albeit we've done the best that we can to date, the things in the Troy School District will look different next year than they look now. There is just no way of getting away from that when you have that much of your budget is tied into people. The third piece that we shared with the board, and our goal has been over the last several years, was to make reductions through attrition. So where individuals might retire, might resign, might leave for whatever reason, attempting to not replace those positions where possible. And unfortunately, we have not been as successful through an attrition model as we had hoped to date. So the board did authorize administration to move forward with an employee severance plan, which is not unusual in the private sector. They happen very often. Reductions of staff and severance is not unusual, buyouts and things along those lines. But it is rather unusual in the public sector, especially in the K-12 school district sector. The last time that we did anything like that in the Troy School District was, I believe, around the 2007-ish school year. So it's been quite a while, about 20 years since that's happened here. But the board did take administration's recommendation to move forward with that. And Dan's going to talk a little bit about what that looks like here in the Troy School District and how that's going to impact our reductions for next year.
So as we look at an employee severance plan, as Dr. Macheski said, this isn't something that's typically very common. You know, it's more of a last resort measure before any layoffs are proposed, and it's really just a voluntary option. You know, districts, obviously, you don't want to lose your more seasoned staff members. They've been around for a number of years. They bring a wealth of knowledge. So there's things to consider before you even go down this road. But as Dr. Macheski indicated, we've attempted attrition over the last 3 years. You know, fortunately, our fund balance throughout the pandemic had continuously increased to a point where we had just under $37 million of savings in our bank account that we could use to offset some of these structural deficits over the last few years. But in order to maintain a healthy level of savings, we need to make sure that we don't continue to draw on them too much. So it was a very strategic drawdown over a 3-year period, bringing that $37 million back down into the $29 or so million range, which for us provides us enough safety net, so to speak, in order to make sure that we're meeting our obligations each year and every month. So going down the employee severance plan route, we work with an outside firm, and they are a firm that specializes in this format of an employee severance plan. So that then allows us to go through and offer something voluntary to staff members that might be eligible based on the years of service they have in this district. So it's our preferred option as opposed to layoffs. We would like to reduce costs through a separation agreement like this. And so it's a collaborative process. This is something that we sit down with our 3 main bargaining groups, so our teachers, our paraprofessional, skilled trades, and our secretarial groups, and we go through and we bargain the terms of what this agreement would look like. Once it's approved by all 3 bargaining units, then it goes to the Board of Education, at which point our Board of Education at the end of April authorized us to proceed with this plan. So we are in the midst of a window, so to speak, of where employees are presented with information, and then they meet with counselors and they can decide ultimately if this is right for them. Fortunately, there's no impact from an employee standpoint in terms of finding employment outside of the Troy School District. It's not an early retirement incentive, which is often used as another option for districts. This one does not require them to fully retire under the state retirement system. So it does allow them to seek employment with another district if they so choose, but for the 5-year period that they would be receiving payments from us after they separate from the district, they cannot work for us in any manner. So this is a route that was talked about conceptually. We didn't really want to do it right up front, but ultimately we settled on that this is the best route to avoid any type of larger scale layoffs.
Yeah. So for the last several months, we've been working on a plan around budget reductions. We took a kind of a whole scale kind of approach to what reductions to the tune of $12 million would look like in the Troy School District. So again, our goal, stay as far away from the classroom as possible, continue to provide supports for students, and how can we do this through attrition, hence the employee severance plan. We believe that we have been able to identify reductions that are on the fringe, if you will, so cutting around the edges of all units within the organization. So you saw a slide earlier, all of the bargaining units within and the employee units within the district. So every employee unit is impacted in some manner or another. So our administrative group will see reductions. Non-rep group, all of our affiliated groups, TEA, TESA, TESPA, are all impacted in some manner. Our third-party contracts are being adjusted where possible, also to gather some savings. We've also done some creative things around deferring or shifting some payments in some areas where it's allowable in order to take some pressure off of the general fund and so forth. So doing everything we can, cutting back on things like conferences and travel and cutting back on organizations that we might otherwise be a part of. Stepping away from some of those areas where possible in order to meet that audacious goal of $12 million. And we believe we've gotten there. Again, it's not without challenge, but it took really a look at the entirety of the organization and all of our expenditures to get to that point. And so we believe we've identified the $12 million at this point, and we are in the process now of operationalizing that. So meeting with potentially impacted staff. So while all of this is going on, the employee severance piece is happening in the background. So our goal is to avoid layoffs. If we have enough individuals that take advantage of the severance plan, we believe that we can also make reductions. And when all is said and done, we have enough spots within the organization where we can avoid any kind of a layoff scenario. So that is our chief goal moving forward as we work with our staff. One thing that has, as we have been sharing this information with our staff across the district, our PTO, PTA, booster groups, we have been sharing this presentation with those groups, working with our school finance engagement group and so forth. Invariably, what folks, when they realize that this is, where we are from a budget reduction standpoint right now is no one's fault within the organization, right? It's not the fault of anyone within our organization. It's not the fault of our board. It's not the fault of administration or staff or teachers or anything. We have been put in this situation because the legislature, the body that identifies the amount of money that is going to be spent on K-12 on an annual basis, that determines what that foundation allowance is going to be on an annual basis, simply has not done their job to fund schools at an appropriate level. And across Michigan, K-12, we are seeing the impact of that. As costs rise, and they rise everywhere, when there is not revenue that allows us to keep pace with those costs, something has to give. And where those ESSERS monies that Dan spoke to, those $32 million over 4 years that had to be spent, that plugged a gap for a period of time. But it didn't solve a problem. And we have a long-term problem in that we have a legislature that refuses to fund K-12 schools appropriately. And when that happens, now we're at a point where we have to make reductions. So invariably, folks will ask appropriately, well, what can we do? What other options are there? And really, quite frankly, there are very few options. After Proposal A went into effect in 1994, essentially the state took away the local districts' ability, the voters within a local district, they took away their ability to raise funds locally to support their schools. And all that control went to Lansing. Lansing then captures those monies by way of that the SET, the school education tax, that 6 mills that everyone pays, that goes directly to Lansing, the non-homestead, the 18 mills that is collected, and so forth. That money is then collected in Lansing and is redistributed across the state on a per pupil basis. Well, now, as funding hasn't kept pace, the question becomes, what else can we do? So there are very few options. What some communities, what some counties have done is take advantage of a provision that was part of Proposal A that allows for a countywide enhancement millage for the purposes of operations, for general operations. The law, when Proposal A went into effect, allowed counties to levy up to 3 mills for this very specific purpose. There are many counties across Michigan who have chosen to do that to date. Oakland County has not. Of recent, 85% of school boards across Oakland County passed resolution to allow for this question of whether there should be a countywide enhancement millage in Oakland County to be on the ballot for August of 26. So August 4th of 26, there will be a question on the ballot for all Oakland County voters. Would you support a 1.5 mil increase to be levied annually for 6 years, and which would generate approximately $781 per pupil? So this question will only be for Oakland County voters. This 1.5 mils annually, this is a tax increase, and transparency, it's important that we share. This is a tax increase that would go directly back to schools in Oakland County. The way it works is, if it were to pass in August, and this is a pass-fail, so if 50% plus 1 say yes, then the 1.5 mils is levied, and those monies are collected at the county level. So Oakland Intermediate School District would capture the revenue, and they would in turn distribute the revenue to every public school student and public charter school student in the state of Michigan. Will go to their district on a per pupil basis. So for the Troy School District, based upon our enrollment for next year, our anticipated enrollment would be just under $9 million. So the Troy School District, if this were to pass, would recognize an increase in $9 million that could be spent on general operating purposes. And that's really important to note, because we started talking about bonds. And again, we're very thankful that the voters in Troy supported our bond initiative of that $555 million bond initiative. But those monies can only be spent on those identified projects. They cannot be spent on general operations. So with that in mind, the countywide enhancement millage can go towards general operations. They can go for things like maintaining class size, maintaining student supports, whether they be math specialists, whether they be reading specialists. They can go to offsetting, for instance, in the Troy School District, we charge families for pay to participate. They can go to offset that cost of pay to participate. So it's an opportunity for us in Troy to give back to offset costs that our families are currently paying in many areas. Just by way of a couple of examples. The interesting thing, or the I think important thing to note for Troy voters is that all of the dollars that would be collected locally here in Troy would stay in Troy. So we're actually about $90,000, I think, to the positive. So based upon the taxable value in Troy, the 1.5 mil increase, all of the dollars collected here would stay here in Troy. So we would realize every dollar generated in Troy here in the Troy School District, which that's not the case in every community across Oakland County, and that's important to say. There are some communities whose taxable value is higher, and as a result, they might receive less back than they're generating. And then there are some that are that will generate less taxable value, but will get more back. But here in Troy, it is every dollar generated locally here would stay in the Troy School District. And you can see on that last bullet point, 300 would be a cost of $300 annually on a home valued at $400,000. Which is a taxable value of $200. So you have to make sure you're looking at the taxable value when we're looking at the cost for the homeowner. As I mentioned, what are things that can this millage revenue could go towards? You can see again reducing class size or maintaining class size. Safety and security is a continued focus for us in the Troy School District. Is something we want to continue to maintain our focus on and enhance where possible. And overall, we want to continue to strengthen the programming we have here in the Troy School District. We are blessed to have a community that has a fierce pride in their schools, a community that cares deeply for the work that happens in our classrooms. They care deeply for the people in our organization, for our teachers, and so forth. Those are some of the things that this enhancement millage would be able to go towards. If you would like to learn more, I would ask you to go to oaklandenhancementmillage.com. There is information on that website for every school district in Oakland County, but more specifically Troy, for our Troy voters. We're doing. There's a number of sharing opportunities from an information standpoint. We're going to be doing some quadrant meetings. May 18th, Monday, we'll be doing a quadrant meeting at the Royal Oak campus of the Oakland Intermediate Tech campus. Is right there in Royal Oak. You can get information on the website as to those meetings. We'll be there. Dan and I will be there. Other superintendents from the Southeast Quadrant here in Oakland County will be there to talk about the impact of the enhancement millage on their school district. But more importantly, it's important to get out and vote. So we encourage folks to take your friends and family, get out and vote in August. It's an important primary election, so please, by all means, put it on your calendar, and remember August 4th will be this important election. We are very thankful for all of you who have tuned in to this this conversation around school finance. Thank you, Dan, for joining in on this conversation. Kendra, Christine, Chris, all of those who have been involved in our meetings with our community engagement group. This is, I think, Ben, we didn't know what to expect when we started this particular group, but it has turned out to be really, I think, an incredible opportunity to bring community together that have an interest in just learning about what's going on in our schools. Specifically, we set out to talk about school finance. We set out to talk about how challenging school finance is, how how intricate and nuanced finance is when we talk about schools. Just how schools are actually funded. Where do our revenues come from? Where do our expenditures go across our school district? When we talk about bonds, how are bonds funded? How are bonds spent? And we've had a chance to talk about budget reductions and just how the impact of the role that Lansing has in terms of impacting school districts from a finance standpoint. So we've had a chance to talk about that. And then we've had a chance to talk about the enhancement millage. And I think I'll leave it at this. The chief function of bringing this group together this fall for five meetings was to talk about advocacy. We simply must, as a community, get involved in talking about the impact that the legislature, that Lansing has on K-12 school funding. We simply cannot sit back and wait for Lansing to provide dollars to the local school district and expect that they're going to do right by all school children in Michigan. I recognize that this is an incredibly challenging process. And there are a lot of interests when it comes to school funding, but there's nothing more important than the opportunity that public schools provides for every child across our state. It is the great equalizer. Mm-hmm. It is what sets apart the United States and our public school system from all others. We take all. We bring all into our classrooms, and we do an exceptional job educating students here in the Troy School District. We want to continue to be able to do that. We need your support. So when you have a chance to talk to our legislators, by all means, tell them how much you love your teachers. Tell them how much you love the work that we do in Troy School District and how important it is that they continue to support the work that's happening here in Troy and across Oakland County and across Michigan. Everyone deserves to have the opportunity to learn in an environment, to grow, to achieve their personal best. And so with that, I'm going to say thank you for tuning in to our series on school finance. Thank you again, Dan, for your continued efforts. And we look forward to seeing you next year as we delve more deeply into continued topics across the Troy School District.